mic test, and also basically my first video here of this format I'm trying. So basically what this channel is going to become is I have an idea. I am a nerd, but I also like things besides just being a nerd. I love, automobiles, motorcycles. I love so many different things besides just what's considered nerdy, a wide range of interests. Motorsports, things like that, a little bit of baseball, but not too much into sports. I think that's the one thing I'm not really heavily into. But what I want to do is I want to basically take my love of nerd culture, my love of everything that is nerd, everything that is also motorcycle car related, and I want to do a vlog on it. I'm not gonna really do any scripts because I think YouTube nowadays is too script heavy and whatever, and what I want to get back to is what the original idea of YouTube was, which was just broadcast yourself, right? So I'm not going to really write scripts for anything I'm going to talk about. What I want to do is have an idea of what I'm going to talk about, but just kind of go off the cuff with my thoughts. Some of the things I enjoy from a nerd perspective: I'm a huge Transformers fan, being a child of the 80s. Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, Terminator, even G.I. Joe, and whatever came out in the 80s and 90s. Not big into Harry Potter, I'll be honest with you there, so I don't expect any videos for Harry Potter because it's not anything I've ever really been interested in, and I only want to talk about things that actually truly do interest me. But as you can see right now, I'm on one of my motorcycles. So I have a couple motorcycles. This one is a 2023 Moto Guzzi V7, mid-modified, a little bit louder exhaust, mapped ECU. So not much performance, but it sounds damn cool. And that's kind of what I was going with, because I'm over the age of where I want pure speed, And then my other bike is a Ducati Scrambler, again, aftermarket exhaust, performance ECU, a little bit faster. That one's actually put away for the year. I haven't taken it out of winter storage. It's in my garage, mainly because I want to be riding this one this year. Probably next year I'll have both out, and I want to be doing vlogs using both of them. Different bikes, different riding ideas. This one's definitely the more slower. The Cruiser, the Ducati is a little bit faster. And then I also have a Subaru WRX. So I live in upstate New York, so the motorcycle stuff will definitely be more in the the late spring, summer, early fall, weather permitting. Obviously this year we had a horrible spring where I didn't even get the bike out until June. And then everything else would be done through the WRX, which WRX, I bought it in March. It's a great little car. I've always wanted one. Finally figured this was the year to do it. I live in the snow belt, so I needed all-wheel drive, so there wasn't a lot of options for performance fun cars that I could do as a daily driver year-round. Something like a Honda Civic Type R or anything like that just wouldn't have made sense for me because it's stuck in the winter. So I'm going to be doing content with that one too, probably more so in the like I said, the winter. I think it would be cool to do some commentary and some videos in the winter when it's snowing out and I'm kind of making rooster trails with with the snow and everything. I think that would be a pretty cool video. Kind of like I've driven now on climate weather, so I could literally have this conversation with myself while I'm going through a whiteout blizzard, and it really wouldn't bother me. I kind of grew up around this stuff, been up in upstate New York, since I was born and raised here. Snow is no, lake effect, all that kind of stuff. Like I grew up in it. It doesn't bother me to drive in it. But again, going back to the topics I'm going to try to do, again, adding Marvel, DC, things like that. So it's whatever's in the nerdosphere at the time, but it also might be things that that I want to talk about. Maybe one day I'll just talk about the sequel trilogies for Star Wars, or the prequel trilogies, and my thoughts and how they've been looked at with a kinder lens, later on as going down through the years. But I'm not really going to probably go on a lot of major nerd stuff, so I wouldn't expect this channel to be kind of with something drops and then 2 hours later you're going to see a video about it. That's not what I want to do. That's more of what I think is trying to pick up what's hot, and that's not really what I'm about. I'm just about random thoughts, have an idea to kind of blabber on for 20-30 minutes, whatever, and just discuss my thoughts on different things. If you're watching this video and it's the first video I'm uploading this format, leave some stuff in the comments, what kind of stuff you'd like to hear me talk about. I know you guys don't know me well yet, but I hope that my subscriber base grows and that we can have these kind of conversations and I build a little community. And on the other side too, I hope that I can turn some quote-unquote nerds into car guys or bike guys, because it's they're two different separate cultures for the most part. And maybe I can convert some some hardcore car guys or bike guys into liking some nerd stuff. It's not uncommon. It's I have a lot of interests. Maybe we can find someone that has similar interests, and I'm hoping to combine my two passions, because honestly I love all this kind of stuff. I'm kind of weird in that sense that I have a very eclectic version of topics. I also enjoy history, so I might even do something about maybe history. That was one of my passions. At one point I wanted to go to college to become a history professor. That didn't work out, obviously. Because I'm not doing that now. But like I said, the main idea for all of this is to just get thoughts out and discuss. I am going to try to stay away from anything modern political topics. I don't think this is the right format for that. I think the problem with that is that gets too heated. And one of the reasons why I like a lot of the quote-unquote nerd stuff is it's escapism, right? Our world is already messed up enough with, all the fighting and who said this to what, and, I hate this person, I don't like hating anybody, but, I just want to make sure that we're not going to be touching on those kind of topics. I understand why, a lot of comics, movies, and things like that will have, political commentary in it, kind of written on undertones, which is fine. But you're never going to give me a conversation, about the current political scene in the world right now, or talk about that kind of stuff, because it's just not something that I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about anything, like true crime or anything like that, because, if I wanted to discuss that and I wanted to figure out that, I just watch the news. I use nerd stuff to kind of get away from what's in the real world, because at the end of the day, most of the nerd stuff you watch, whether it's comic books, science fiction, a majority of them are, the good guys prevail, right? Like it always, for the most part, always has a happy ending. Everybody, at the end of the day, it believes the best in everybody, and that's something that's, you're not going to necessarily get if you just follow the current news, because it's depressing. There was a meme years ago that I remember that I liked, that had, why people are into nerd culture, and, one of the panels had, all about, the current world war, death, all that kind of, stuff. And then you ended up having all of, the nerd people from, inside the TARDIS, right? And it was like, come on, this way, Starscream made cookies, and that's kind of what I kind of want to do. I want to just relax, go for a ride on my bike or in my WRX, and just blabber. I hope that you guys like it. I hope that at the end of the day, it strikes a chord with people, and do that kind of stuff. But again, if you guys have any questions or have any ideas, again, I'm not going to script anything. I'm just going to pick a topic and blabber on. As an example for right now, so the Avengers Doomsday trailer that dropped a few days ago from when this recording. And, you know, from my discussion on looking at that, I'm not really excited. And the reason is because I haven't really been excited since they announced that Robert Downey Jr. was coming back as Dr. Doom. As a Tony Stark variant, I understand why it makes sense in the MCU, but then again, you're also doing a huge disservice to all the, you know, the Fantastic Four and the Doom fans out there that are not getting Victor Von Doom in there. And I think that a lot of that was to put butts in seats, because with Robert Downey Jr. back, a lot of people will go see that kind of thing. I think that's what they're kind of betting on. You know, I think that's going to be their play, because, you know, at the end of the day, that makes sense from a business perspective, even if it's not something that, you know, I would enjoy. Now granted, I don't read comics. I haven't in years. I just don't have the time. So I'm not even sure if a Tony Stark variant is a current version of Doom in any of the current Marvel series or whatever. But, you know, I was looking forward to Doom, and they kind of, I don't know. So, you know, and being a huge Avengers fan, being Iron Man being my favorite character ever since the 80s when I was a kid, because, again, I'm a huge Transformers fan, so for me, I've always liked mechanical things, you know. Like Batman is always my favorite DC character because it's a real guy that just has a lot of money and a lot of gadgets, which is cool. You know, Tony Stark, he's a genius, and he has a lot of money for gadgets, and he basically built himself, you know, a suit. You know, that's something that anyone, you know, in theory, reality, could actually do. You know, it's not like, you know, Thor, where he's a demigod, or Superman, where he's an alien from another planet. You know, it gives it not necessarily grounded in reality, but it gives it more, you know, realism, in the sense that if you think hard enough and believe, anyone could be Iron Man, you know. So yeah, so I've been a huge Avengers fan since that original movie, and obviously I know why they wanted to you know, Robert Downey Jr. wanted to get out of the role. You know, he'd been doing it for 15 years when they did, you know, Endgame. Actually, almost 20 years if you think about it, because it was 19, yeah. It's almost 20 years he'd been doing, or not 20 years, sorry. Almost 10 years he'd been doing, you know, Iron Man, and he wanted to be known for something else probably, and it made him a boatload of money. So, you know, I can understand. You know, seeing Chris Evans back as Steve Rogers is cool. I know he wanted to get out of it too, which, you know, that's one of the reasons why I'm thinking that they're just kind of bringing these characters back to get butts in seats, because, you know, everything since after Endgame, with the exception of a few, you know, Spider-Man movies for the most part, didn't really hit home as well as they should have. So, you know, I can understand that from that perspective, but not something that I would go with. But, you know, we'll see how it goes. I do plan on seeing it. I do plan on seeing Brand New Day when it's in the theater. So, even though I'm not a huge Spider-Man fan, I am looking forward to that movie, because I think that those movies, for the most part, they've been done pretty good. You know, and I wasn't a huge fan of the Tobey Maguire or the Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans, so I kind of like the way they've been doing it with Tom Holland. So I am kind of excited for that one, although I would like to see a decent Venom brought in there, but it is what it is. But yeah, so back to the Avengers Doomsday trailer. Like, you know, I was even excited for Age of Ultron, mainly because Ultron is one of my favorite villains from the MCU, or not the MCU, sorry, from the comics, and I think they did him a disservice as well, because they gave him too many emotions. I wasn't a huge fan of his character's face design. So, I mean, you can see obviously from my discussions here that I am kind of a cranky nerd. I like things, you know, a certain way, but I'm an old school, you know, nerd guy, you know. You know, as I said, I was also a huge Transformers fan. So, you know, the Bayverse for me, wasn't a huge fan of the designs. I think that the Travis Knight designs for Bumblebee were the best. But I understand why they had to do the Bayverse designs, and, you know, I'll never give a lot of, you know, shade to the Bayverse stuff, because it made Transformers relevant again, in all honesty. You know, it was a dying franchise, just some cartoons and things like that, and then it blew up, and it made Hasbro now one of their premium, you know, sub brands. So, you know, I can't give shade to to them for that. You know, from a business perspective, it put them back on the map and made it cool to like Transformers again, where for me, you know, always being a Transformers fan since the 80s, you know, it was never as big as it was. So yeah, but you know, guys, like I said, this is just gonna be me rambling, just talking about whatever I feel like talking about. Pick topics. You know, if I don't know the topic, I will tell you I don't know the topic, and if it's not something that I think that I would be able to cover it. You know, examples, like I said earlier, Harry Potter, Battlestar Galactica, you know, what's that one? I'm blanking there. But like, you know, if I don't know the fandom, I'm not gonna engage on it because it's just something that I don't know. Like I said, big Star Wars, Star Trek, stuff like that. But yeah, so as you can see right now, I'm just going for a ride. I'm actually going to get some pizza and wings with my girlfriend. I'm meeting her after work, so I decided it'd be a good time to, you know, give this a test, see how the mic works. Still kind of learning all this YouTube stuff. Again, don't expect heavy editing. I'm just putting a camera on the front of my helmet, putting a mic in my helmet here, and recording it. I'm not going to edit it when I put it up right. There's a scene you see a lot up here is Amish, but you know, it's going to be just me hitting record and talking. So if you guys are sick of all the heavily produced and, you know, heavily overdone content that's made for clickbait articles and just people that, you know, just trying to get you know, random likes and stuff like that, and just trying to fill out the 10 minutes of what's required, you know, you're not going to see that here. You're going to see real raw emotion, discussions. You know, I'm going to tell you what I think about things. It'll never be a discussion where, you know, that I'll just do it just to get likes or views. I want to have some segment of integrity, and I want to make sure that, you know, that I bring, you know, a sense of truth and honesty, as well as, you know, knowledge about the topic. I'm not just going to talk about something just to talk about it because I think it'll give me clicks and make me money. I literally just want to talk to people about stuff. You know, I'll say this: years ago, I used to work as an overnight network engineer, and it was with one of my friends. And you know, it was kind of quiet sometimes, and him and I would sit there, and we would literally just have intellectual conversations about the history of Transformers or Star Trek like we would go over like the whole history of everything and just talk back and forth. You know, honestly, it's almost like if I was it's one half of a podcast basically. It's a conversation with you guys over stuff. You know, so don't expect, you know, anything other than the rambling. But other than that, I do believe we're all set for now. I would normally pull over and stop the video, but I got a guy behind me on a motorcycle, and you can see him right there. So if I pull over, he's going to stop, and it's going to be a whole thing. So I'm just going to end the camera, and we're just going to upload it, and we'll see what we do. All right, have a good day, guys.